first I tried to think up what a name would be. And I thought, okay, I want to have, there's a couple of things that I get to do in this case that are really kind of cool. One thing I get to do is come up with a title myself, and I thought, okay, for a title, I want an action title for an action game, so I thought revenge. Revenge is always a good action word for a title, because everybody wants revenge for something at some point. So everyone can identify with revenge. So I thought, it's going to be revenge, because, you know, there's lots of vindictive fantasies, you know, you can fulfill in a situation like this. And then I thought, okay, so who's revenge? And I thought this was another great opportunity in my life. Because one thing I've always wanted to do was add a word to the English language. And so I thought, here's my chance to do that. I'm going to make up a name for something, and if it becomes popular and it really gets out there and runs around, I will have created a new word in the English language, and wow, wouldn't that be cool? For me, I thought that would be really cool, because I'm still a nerd. And so I thought, okay, I started thinking of names. When you're trying to think of a name for a character that's really new, everything you think of is stupid. It's just, oh, that's stupid, it's ridiculous, oh my God, it's a stupid name. It's hard to come up with a decent name. And then I thought, I'm going to stop trying to make up a name, and I'm going to try and come up with a name that has an Easter egg in it, because I'm very big on Easter eggs. So everything has to have a double, triple hidden meaning and all this kind of stuff. That's very important. So I came up with my little plan. And what it was, because first I had written this story. And I was trying to think of what I'm going to name the character. And the story was about these flies who get caught on a spaceship, and they go out in outer space, and they get irradiated, and they kill all the humans. Now they take over their own solar system, and now there's a monster that's after them. And so what goes around comes around in the universe, I guess. But what's the name of the character? And I thought, I need leverage. I need some leverage with this. So I thought, okay, Ray Kazar is the CEO of Atari at the time. So I thought Ray spelled backwards is Yar. That works phonetically. Fortunately, he had a good name. You know, that's what Ray came in handy for. You spell his name backwards, it still sounds reasonably like a word. So I thought there'll be Yars, and it'll take place in the Razak solar system, which is Kazar spelled backwards. And so I thought, there we go. And that's the name, and that's how I named the characters. And I hatched my little plot in my head, and I thought, oh, this is good. So I got the story typed up, and had all stuff set, and the next day, here comes the product manager. I go, hey, here's my submission. He said, we still on time? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. So I gave it to him, and he goes, and he puts it in. And the next day, I see him again, and say, hey, have they decided what they're going to do yet? Nope, not yet. I said, listen, I said, I want to tell you something. I said, but I don't want this to influence the naming of the game. And he's like, okay. And I said, no, really, this has got to be a secret. You've got to promise not to tell anybody. And I made him swear 3 times that he wouldn't tell everyone, so I was sure he would tell everyone. And I told him, I said, you know that Yar thing, the character? I said, what's that spelled backwards? And he goes, Ray. And I go, yeah, and Razak, it's in the Razak solar system, right? I go, what's that spelled backwards? He's like, Kazar, Ray Kazar. He goes, are you kidding? I said, no. I said, it's Ray Kazar, it's part of the name of the game. He goes, does Ray know about this? He said, well, of course Ray knows about it. I said, wouldn't do this if Ray didn't know. But that's why I don't want you to tell anybody, because I think it would unfairly influence the submission. And he's like, okay. I said, you won't tell anybody? No. So the next day I run into him and he goes, guess what? What? We're going with Yar's Revenge. There was no question in my mind. He went right back, told everybody, oh my God, Ray knows about this. This is Ray's name, and we got to go with this plan. And you know, Ray had no idea. It was something I had just made up. And so that was kind of fun. And so that was cool. And it also became the first video game that had a backstory, because it became a comic book that was published with the thing. So it was the first time that had been done. They produced additional media along the line of the storyline of the game. So there were a lot of firsts in Yar's Revenge. And I was very proud of that. That was very cool. And then about several months later, we used to have these press events where we would show up and we'd have to play our game for the press, for the cameras and stuff, and be on these big TVs, which in those days were big TVs, which now are medium-sized TVs. But it was like, and we'd play our game, and I was playing Yar's Revenge, and Ray Kazar comes up to me. And he goes, hey, Howard, he goes, I heard what you did with that name thing. I go, really, Ray? I said, well, what did you think about that? He goes, keep making games, Howard. So that's how Yar's Revenge got its name. I want to do that stuff. I always think that's a fun story. So, Are there any other questions? Yes?
Just I want to follow on Yours Revenge. Talk about the sound design.
Well, the sound design for Yours Revenge I think was interesting because there was a couple of things that I really had in mind to do with it. One of them was I wanted to have an ongoing, I wanted to use sound to make the game bigger than you were aware of. That was my idea. Whether I achieved that or not, I don't know. But my idea was that, first of all, you know, how many of you know the term B science fiction? Right? Okay, because I grew up on B science fiction, because in the 1950s, there were a shitload of low-budget, crappy sci-fi movies, and I saw every single one of them. And that's what I do. I would come home and I would turn on whatever channel had the B sci-fi on, and I would watch that. You know, I was one of those people who watched like 6 hours of TV a day, 7 if there was anything good on. I was always watching TV, and that's what I liked to watch, was any kind of, you know, B sci-fi stuff. And in a lot of those movies, you'd have the mad scientist in the lab, and you'd have the arcing electrodes, right, over the thing to show the big powers going on here and stuff. And there was that sound. I can't really do it very well. But there's that sound, that arcing electric sound, and you'd see the little electric bolt, you know, rising up. That was a very iconic thing back in B sci-fi. And I thought, that's what I'm going to have. So I started with that as that was like the heartbeat of the monster. That was this basic thing that was always going on. And then there was the idea of their pacing. There are things, as you get closer to stuff or farther from stuff, the volume changes a little. And there's a cue you get in sound before the monster changes to the swirl and before it fires. So there are things that happen in the game that cue you to what's going on in the game, but I don't know if you always get aware of it, but it elevates tension while you're playing the game. And so these were the kind of things that I did. Another thing that I did for Yours that wasn't strictly sound design, but I made the game with no frame. A lot of people put frames around their games. That was a very standard thing to do. On the basis you put a frame and you put your score at the bottom or the top, and the game plays in the frame. And what I pictured was having a black background and no frame, because the way I pictured playing a video game was at night in the dark. You turn off all the lights, you turn your game, and here's you play your game. Which means when you have a black screen, it melts into the background and it feels bigger. It's going to feel like it's part of the room instead of just sitting in a frame. And so I just liked that idea. And so I did that. And the sound combined with that, I think, really gave it a bigger feel in some ways. At least that was my intention. Did that answer your question? Well, thank you. Yes?
So, you know, as you were saying earlier, the EP is, kind of working all the time. But I was just curious.
I've heard that opinion.
I was just curious, considering some of the other things that Atari was doing at the time, and of course the video game crash, 1983, like for instance with Sword Quest, wasn't for the 4-part series. What would you say the biggest factor to that was, the actual crash?
The actual crash?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great question. Question, what's really the biggest factor of the crash? Well, I'd like to think that I single-handedly, with about 8K of 6502 code, brought down $1 billion industry. I don't think that's the case. And we happen to have the man here who did Pac-Man and some of the Sword Quest games. That's Todd. And between the two of us, you could say, well, you can't kill $1 billion industry by yourself. It takes 2 people to do that. So I could say that we did, but I don't really think that's accurate. I think, and the movie Atari Game Over really looks into this and really goes into this, but I have to say that I think what it was business practices is the thing that does it. What happened was Atari was very aggressive, and that's a very euphemistic term, for the way they would deal with distributors and the way they would shove product down people's throats when they were on top and they could do it. And they really put the screws to a lot of people. So when you're on top, you can do that, and that's business, and that's the way it goes. And if you stay on top, and you're always, in the driver's seat, well, that's the way business is. A lot of Microsoft competitors know that all too well. Okay? But if the day ever comes where the tide turns, if you've been practicing those kind of business practices, then the people who want revenge will come back at you with both feet. And so I think what happened is that as the tide turned, as things like Pac-Man and E.T. and stuff that fell short of, I'm not saying they were good or bad games, but they clearly did not meet consumer expectations, okay? So when that starts to happen, people don't start picking up the big ticket items from distributors. The distributors turn around and do everything they can to hurt you when they can. And I think that's the thing that really hurt Atari. That, and it was sort of like the fall of the Roman Empire. Atari was a place of tremendous excess. And that was the thing that made it great. That's what made it a cool place to be, but it also made it a very volatile place to be. And ultimately, a place you couldn't be, because it wasn't there anymore. So I think, I hope that sheds some light on it. Yes?
Is it true that you used to go around whipping people with bullets?
That's an interesting question. Is it true that I used to go around whipping people with the bullwhip? That is not true. What is true is that I did used to walk around with a 10-foot bullwhip and crack it in the hallways and stuff, but I never hit anybody with it, except me once in a while. That was unfortunate. And in fact, there was a film crew that came by once when I happened to be walking around, because every once in a while you'd see a film crew at Atari who's in for doing some story. There's a film crew in one of the labs, and I happened to walk in, and there I am with the bullwhip, and there they are with the camera, and it's like, oh, let's talk to this guy. And they looked at me and they said, so what's with the whip? I said, I said, the whip is for R&D. And they're like, yeah? I go, yeah, research and discipline. So, true story. But I never hit anybody with the whip. Yes.
You're known for putting Easter eggs in games. Did you have enough time to put even one Easter egg in E.T.?
Did I have enough time to put even one Easter egg in E.T.? Are there any Easter eggs in E.T.? Yes. Oh, yeah. Because there's always time for Easter eggs. And so Easter eggs are very important. I have a philosophy of Easter eggs, which is every game is going to have, Yars' Revenge has an HSW WSH in it, right? The reason it's HSW WSH, as I was just explaining, is to give you the key to know that Yar is really Ray and Razak is really Kazar. It tells you that you need to reverse words to figure out what's going on. At least that was going on in my head. I'm sure everyone who finally got an HSW WSH goes, oh, so that's what Yar is. Yeah, but it worked for me. So that was the thing, but that was my first game. As of Raiders, I decided that in every game that I would do, there would be an HSW with a number next to it, and that number would be the number of the game. So there's an HSW2 in Raiders that you can find. And there's also going to be, every one of the main characters in my previous game is going to appear in the next game. So in Raiders, there's a way to go into one of the pits where you dig to find the treasure, and you can get a Yar to fly out of that pit in Raiders. So in E.T., in one of the pits, there's a flower that you heal, right? You heal the flower. But under the right circumstances, if you go in there in the first level of the game and you heal the flower, and it turns into a Yar and flies out of the pit. And then if you finish that level and come back to the second level, you go back and heal the flower, and it turns into Indiana Jones from Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it just sits there, doesn't go anywhere, because they didn't have that much time. And then if you go around the third time and heal it again, you'll see in the score readout, it'll say HSW3, because E.T. was my third game, and there's an HSW. Also, there's a way that you can get the, the indicator in the upper right that tells you what the square you're standing on does. That will turn into a JMD, which is the name for, the initials for Jerome Demuret, who did the graphics for E.T., so that's in there. And there's one other thing I did that was signature-wise, that if you really look carefully at the three phone pieces, when they're sitting in the wells, one of them is a messed up H, one of them is a messed up S, and the other one is a messed up W. So, yeah, I definitely put some Easter eggs in E.T. But I always had, I would not spend much data on it. I had to, very little data went into the signatures, and basically not a lot of time. It wasn't hard to pop that kind of stuff in. Once you have a full game structure going on, throwing in a little thing like that and changing one pointer to go point to these graphics instead of that graphics, it's really not a lot of work. but I always put the SIGs in last. I did do that. Oh, the redhead over in the side. What a fabulous looking woman you are.
Well, thank you, sir.
Do you have a question?
I was
On
wondering,
camera
you
for a
have so
sec.
many fantastic stories. Will there be a book?
What a great question. What a great question. I tell you honestly, if I would have planted someone in the audience, I would have asked them to ask that question. Absolutely, that's fabulous. As a matter of fact, I am writing a book. I'm working on a book that'll be out in a while, probably within the next 2 months, I'm hoping. It's going to be about a lot of shenanigans and stuff that we did at Atari, stuff from the dig, the whole ET, I call it etiology. You know, as a therapist, you got to say words like that. And that'll be out in 2 months. I just wanted to pop that. Oh, by the way, @HS Warshaw is my Twitter thing. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I always love it when my follow number goes up. I just get very excited about that. So it makes my day. Thank you. Be about 27, I think, right? What is that? Back here.
You talked about how when you're starting a game, you have the original concept for it, and probably maybe 15 to 20% of that actually goes into it if you're lucky. What was the original concept for ET that didn't make it in?
ET is a special case. That's a really good question. ET probably is going to be the highest percent of realization of the original concept of any of the games that I did. But the main reason for that is the threshold for that design was lower than almost any other game that I did, and I only had 5 weeks to decay the design, right? So it wasn't enough time to ruin it, basically. So unfortunately, I delivered exactly what I had planned. You know, I'll tell you an interesting ET story about the design of what it is, because what happened was I got a call. I literally was sitting in my office in the afternoon. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I believe. That was the 27th of July. It was a Tuesday afternoon in 1982. If there are any autists in the audience, I'm sure you can bear me out on that. And so I got a call from Ray Kazar. Ray Kazar, the CEO of Atari, called me in my office. Actually, he didn't call me, because CEOs don't call you. Their secretaries call you. And I got a call on my phone, answered the phone. Will you hold for Ray Kazar? Yeah, he signs my paychecks. Yeah, I'll do that. And Ray comes on, he goes, hey Howard, we need ET for September 1st, can you do it? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that, Ray. We will work this out. And what I didn't know was that he had already called George Gish, the director of our department, who had told him, no, nobody can do a game in 5 weeks. You can't have the game in 5 weeks. You should have told us earlier about this. You can't do